Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth Page. I'm the propagator here at Greenleaf Nursery Company in Park Hill, Oklahoma. Today I want to talk to you about how I create my propagation schedule here at the nursery. First, a little background on Greenleaf. We are a 600-acre wholesale container nursery. We grow over 1,100 different varieties of ornamental trees, shrubs, annuals and perennials, as well as conifers. We propagate all year round and produce close to 10 million liners per year. About 90% of our total production schedule is produced from cuttings taken here at the nursery. We have over 11 acres of dedicated growing space just for propagation. Our schedules are not like typical propagation schedules with quick turnarounds. On average, we grow and maintain our liners for approximately 8 to 12 months before they are transplanted out into the field. This method allows us enough time within the growing season to take everything that we need, so in case we have a crop loss, we will have the time to make it up within that growing season. So before we can really get started in creating a propagation schedule, we need to understand the needs of our production schedule first. Like I said, with over 1,100 different varieties and multiple can sizes within those varieties, our total number of cuttings start adding up. For instance, there could be multiple liners in one container, and within those liners themselves can be multiple cuttings. So today I want to show you a few different groups and categories of plants that we grow here, and how many liners are in each container, as well as how many cuttings are in each liner. So these plants behind me are going to be the easiest numbers to input into a propagation schedule, due to the fact that there's only one cutting per liner, one liner per pot, no matter what size that they're in. So for instance, all of our tree production is going to be one liner per pot, one cutting per liner. So like our maples that we're going to be using, our 1 gallon maples that we'll be using for shifting up into larger containers, or our liner direct plants such as our corkscrew willows that we can plant directly into a 5 gallon. All of these are just going to have one liner per pot, one cutting per liner. Our rose production is also just going to be one liner in here. So our 1 gallon Grand Champion red roses, these are going to just have one cutting in here, as well as our 3 gallons. They're such vigorous growers that they fill out these cans pretty easily. So like I said, one liner per pot, one cutting per liner. All of our blackberries and raspberries are going to be one cutting per liner, one liner per pot. Hardy hibiscus as well. All of these are pretty vigorous growers. They'll fill out their container size no matter if it's a 1 gallon or a 5 gallon. It's always going to be one liner per pot. All of our grass divisions, such as our Hamlin dwarf fountain grasses, all these are going to have one division in here. So whether it's a 1 gallon or a 5 gallon, all going to have one liner per pot. And lastly, our upright junipers are going to have one liner in here. This is for obvious reasons. We want a central leader on these. We don't want a lot of competition with multiple cuttings or liners. So these are always going to have one liner per pot. Same with our sky pencil hollies. If you start putting multiple cuttings in here, the body themselves tends to fall apart, and it makes shearing a lot more difficult. So once again, these are all going to have just one liner per pot, one cutting per liner. So this category is all going to start out as one cutting per liner. However, as we start getting up into larger containers, we will start putting multiple liners in there to fill it out. So for example, all of our hydrangea macrophyllus are going to be produced with one cutting per liner when we stick them in propagation. So on our fuchsia glow hydrangeas, our 1 gallons here is just going to have one liner in here, so one cutting, as well as our 2 gallons, just one liner. However, when we get up to our 3 gallons, we will put two liners in here. On heavenly bamboo nandina, these are propagated through seed. So it's only just going to be one seedling per liner. However, on a 3 gallon heavenly bamboo, we're going to put 3 liners in here. But they're still just going to have one seedling per liner. On our multi-trunk maples, like our flame amber maples, they also start out as one cutting per liner. But for a multi-trunk, we want to put 3 of them in there. And lastly, our wisteria is going to be stuck just one cutting per liner, but on our larger containers that are staked up to a ladder, we'll actually put 2 of them in there so that we have equal growth going up on each side of the ladder. So in a propagation schedule, how it looks to be when we're taking cuttings, our 1 gallons and 2 gallon hydrangeas, say if we wanted 500 of each, since there's only 1 liner per container, it's just going to show up 500 times 1, so we just need to produce 500 cuttings for those containers. But our 3 gallons, if we want 500 3 gallons, it's going to show 500 times 2 to have those 2 liners in there. So we need to take a total of 1,000 cuttings to produce those 500 3 gallons. Same with our multi-trunks and our heavenly bamboos. When we want to produce 500 3 gallons on heavenly bamboo, it's going to show 500 times 3 for the 3 seedlings in there. Same with the flame amber maples. It's going to be 500 times 3. And for our 5 gallon wisterias, if we want 500 of these, it's going to be 500 times 2 for those 2 liners in each of these. So in this category, all of our liners are stuck times 2. And as we go up into larger containers, we will actually double up on our liners. This is so that we can build up bigger body in each size without having to shear so much. So an example would be our hydrangea arborescens. This is Annabelle hydrangea. All of our liners are stuck times 2. So we have multiple sizes for this one. We've got 2 gallons, 3 gallons, and 5 gallons. On our 2 gallons, it's just going to have 1 liner in here with 2 cuttings. Our 3 gallons are going to have 2 liners in them for a total of 4 cuttings. And our 5 gallons are going to have 3 liners in them for a total of 6 cuttings. So in our propagation schedule, if we wanted to produce 500 of each of these sizes, what it would look like would be on our 2 gallons, it would be 500 times 2 for a total of 1,000 cuttings. On our 3 gallons, it would be 500 times 4 for a total of 2,000 cuttings. And our 5 gallons would show 500 times 6 for a total of 3,000 cuttings. That gives us the total number of cuttings that we need to take for this one variety. On our Crimson Dull Lilacs, same way. We're going to stick our liners times 2. In our 1 gallons, it's just going to have 1 liner in here with 2 cuttings. On our 3 gallons, we're going to have 2 liners in them for a total of 4 cuttings in the 3 gallon. I would say most of the broadleaf cuttings that we take here at the nursery, we're going to stick those cuttings times 2. And typically they're all going to be the same liners in each container. For 1 gallon, it's just going to be 1 liner, 3 gallons, 2 liners, 5 gallons, 3 liners. We don't typically plant a lot of 5 gallons liner direct, but with the few varieties that are vigorous growers, we're able to do that. So on our Golden Mound Spirea, these liners are stuck times 2, and there's only 2 liners in this 5 gallon. It's one of the few that can actually make up in a 5 gallon liner direct planted. So in our last category, I want to talk to you about a few of our specialty crops. These crops either struggle with body or have multiple growing years or end up being shifted up into larger containers. So these are not going to be planted like most of our containers, like I talked about previously. I'm going to give you examples of our densiformis yews. These typically will get shifted up into larger containers, such as 5 or 7 gallons. We struggle to get enough body on these with the few cuttings that we do put in them. So on these, we're actually going to put 3 liners in here, 3 bare root liners in a 1 gallon. That way, if the body is big enough to be shifted up into a larger container later on. On our clethras, this is 16 candles summer sweet. These struggle all the time with enough body, no matter how many times that we shear them. So in a 1 gallon, it's actually going to have 5 cuttings in here in order to get the body that we desire on them. Well, we can't stick 5 cuttings in 1 liner. So what we've decided to do is to stick these in ground beds, let them grow out in the summer. In the fall, we will dig them and pot 5 of those bare root cuttings in a 3-inch pot, let them root in over the winter, and in that following spring, we will plant 1 of those liners with the 5 cuttings in them in a 1 gallon pot. And then for our 3 gallon clethra, we'll actually put 2 of those pots in there. So this is going to have a total of 10 cuttings in a Liner Direct 3-gallon. On our Althea production, we again struggle with body on Altheas. This is a Blue Angel Althea. On a 2-gallon Althea, we would typically just put 1 liner with 2 cuttings. However, with Altheas, we'll put 2 liners for a total of 4 cuttings to get the body that we desire on a 2-gallon. We also have crops that have multiple growing years. So for instance, our Golden Pacific Shore Junipers, we have a 1-year crop as well as a 2-year crop. In our 1 years, we're going to plant 2 liners in here, 2 bare root liners. So this is going to be ready for sale in 1 year. On our 2-year crops, it's just going to have 1 cutting in here. So it's smaller than the previous one that I showed you. However, this is going to be grown on an additional year. And then our last one that we have is Shoal Creek Vitex. These Vitexes are sold in multiple sizes from 3s, 5s, 7s, 15s, all the way up to 25 gallons. In our 3 and 5 gallons, we can easily plant 1 liner in those containers with 2 cuttings. So they'll fill out and grow out perfectly fine for what we want. However, in our larger containers that get shifted up from 5 gallons, we want a multi-branch container for those. So on a 5 gallons that are specifically for shifting into 7s or 15s, we will put 3 liners in them for a total of 6 cuttings to get that multi-branching that we like in those sizes. So now that we have a feel for all the containers that we grow here and how many liners are in each container, I want to show you an example of our crepe myrtle production from liner all the way up to a 25 gallons. So crepe myrtles are going to be a good example of our large container production. This is Colorama Scarlet. This is one of our new garden debut crepe myrtles. It's a hybrid seedling from Natchez, so it tends to be a vigorous grower. This 25 gallon only takes about 5 growing seasons to produce, and it's produced by shifting a 15 gallon. What we look for on a 25 gallon, which is the largest container that we sell here at the nursery, we look for a multi-trunk. So you can see on this container, it's got at least 4 trunks, which is the minimum that we desire. And when we shift our 15 gallons to create a 25, we grade out those particular crepe myrtles to make sure they have at least 4 trunks on them. So for instance, in our production schedule, when we create what we want to produce, we start with the largest container first and we work our way down. So on a 25 gallon, if say we wanted to sell 100 of them, we would need to reserve 100 of 15 gallons for this 25 gallon shift. So onto our 15 gallons, these are shifted in the fall like with the other ones, and same specifications. We want at least 4 trunks on these. So if we want to, say, sell 500 15 gallons, we also need to reserve the 100 for the 25. So on our production schedule, it's going to show 600 15 gallons for production. These are produced by shifting a 7 gallon in the fall. So our 7 gallons, this is kind of where it starts affecting our propagation schedule. Once again, 7 gallons are shifted in the fall to a 15. So if we wanted to sell 500 7 gallons, we also need to reserve 600 15 gallons. So on our production schedule, it's going to show 1,100 7 gallons. Same specifications. We want at least 4 trunks on these. So these are produced by shifting from a 3 gallon. The 3 gallons are planted liner direct from our liners. That's where it starts affecting our schedule. Our 3 gallons have an extra liner in them to help get the multi-trunks that we desire in the larger containers. So we have actually 3 liners in here that have potentially for 6 trunks because we stick our liners times 2. That way, as it's going up the shifting process, if we lose a trunk here and there, you know, we'll be okay with that. So that's why we plan those with an extra liner. So once again, these 3 gallons are shifted in the fall and then sold the following year as a 7 gallon. So not only do we want the multi-trunks as we're moving up the shifting process, we also want the right height. So these 3 gallons, once they're planted in the spring of that year, they will not be sheared the entire growing season. We want to try to get them as tall as possible so that we have the right height for the shifting process later that fall. Now in propagation, we also will not shear our liners. We want to make sure that the initial start as a 3 gallon is also a little bit taller than most, so they have that head start. So on our liners, once they root in, we will do an initial shear on them, and then after that we will just let them grow up to be as tall as we can get, so that the following spring we can shift them as a tall liner, usually about 18 to 24 inches, into a 3 gallon. That way it gives them a little bit of a head start. Now, we also, not only do we shift our 3 gallons into the 7s, but we also sell 3 gallons by themselves. However, we don't need an extra liner in those containers. Most of our 3 gallons, like we saw in our previous videos, are only planted with 2 liners. So we will, on our production schedule, we'll actually have 2 different lines. We'll have one line for our shift that shows the number times 6 for what we need for our shifters, and then we also have a line for our 3 gallons that shows times 4 for our containers being sold as a 3 gallon. Now that we have gone through some of the process here on how we go through our large container production, as well as some of the other varieties that we grow in the previous videos, let's look at it on the computer to see how that relates to a propagation schedule.
Okay, so here is an example of a production schedule for Colorama Scarlet Crepe Myrtle. This is the variety we've been discussing in the previous video. We normally have a lot more information built into our production schedule for all the varieties that we grow here at the nursery. However, for the ease of this video, I'm just going to talk about the columns that I use to create my propagation schedule. So we'll start over here to the left. We obviously have our sales year here. This is the year they're going to be available for sale, how many years it takes to produce, and these are actually growing seasons, so they may not be a full 12 months. We have our container size, our container color, so if they're going to be in a branded pot or a deco pot, what brand and color pot they're going to be in over here. We have the plant shift source code. This will tell me if they are planted directly from liners or if they're going to be shifted instead. So, and this will tell me the container that they're shifted from. So 7 will come from a 3 gallon, 15 gallon would be coming from a 7 gallon, and then a 25 gallon would be coming from a 15 gallon. We have a botanical name, common name, and the total schedule column, and that takes into consideration what we want to sell and adding in the ones that we need to reserve for shift. These columns pertain to only liner direct plantings that will tell me if I need 2 liners or 3 liners in a container, how many cuttings are going to be in each liner, and the total number of liners required for those plantings. And this last column is the month that they're going to be planted or shifted in. All of our liner direct plantings are usually done in the spring, and our shifts are normally done in the fall. That will allow them to root in the winter, grow throughout the spring, and be available for sale late summer, early fall for these shifted varieties. So onto these columns that are the most important ones. These are the numbers that I need to input into my propagation schedule. I won't add anything that has to do with shift into my actual propagation schedule. I'm only needing to know how many liners that need to be planted. So, but we need to eventually need to get to this number here. So if the salesmen want to sell 100 units of a 25 gallon, we will put that 100 up here on the shift reserve, and that'll get added into the number of 15 gallons that we want to sell here for a total of 615 gallons. This number will then go up here on the 7-gallon line, added to the number of 7 gallons that we want to sell, to get to 1100. And then this 1100 is going to be on this line for shift reserve. And since this is on this line here is completely separate from the ones that are for sale, these are only for shift. I won't have anything in this column. So 1100 is what I need to plant, and this will be how many liners that we need. So to get the multi-trunks, we will add an extra liner in there. The cuttings, how many cuttings per liner. This is the total number of liners I need to plant in this 3-gallon. And then I have the number that we want to sell in 3 gallons here. We don't have any coming out of for shift. So we've got the liners, 2 liners in those containers, 2 cuttings for 1,000 liners total. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our propagation schedule. Okay, so here is our propagation schedule for Colorama Scarlet. I just have it filtered down for this one variety to make it easier to focus on the information as we're discussing it. So we've got our genus, botanical, common name over here. When I have my full schedule in here, it's sorted by botanical name to keep all of the varieties together. I've got the container size and the units from the production schedule here, the planting month and year from the production schedule. I also have a column for our sticking month and year. So this is when we'll actually be collecting cuttings and sticking them. The time for finished liners, this is the minimum amount of time it will take to cut, stick, and root a liner to be ready for planting. Now this doesn't necessarily reflect the sticking month. I use this information here based on the ideal cutting time for each variety. But this number will reflect if I've got any short turnaround crops that I need to produce or any makeup crops. This will let me know when is the very last month I can cut and stick those liners. We've got the other information from the production schedule of how many liners per container, cuttings per liner. This number here is the total number of cuttings needed. This has a formula built in that will take the units requested multiply it by the liners per container, multiplied by the cuttings per liner to get this number here. And for these columns, these are our rooting percentages and grade outs. The first column here, this is what we actually have rooted as soon as they come off of mist. However, since they stay in propagation for quite a while, we'll have some losses due to drying out or insects or pests. So we'll add in a rooting grade out percentage here, and then this is going to be the final rooting percentage that we expect to get. So this column, it says adjusted total number of cuttings. This will has a formula that's built in to calculate number of cuttings needed divided by the final rooting percentage, and that'll be the number of cuttings that I actually need to cut out in the field. And you'll notice in this grade out percentage is much higher, and they will fluctuate in between each variety and for whatever purpose they're going to be serving. So for instance, since these are going to be planted just for shift, we want to be a little bit more picky on the liners themselves. We want to make sure they have at least 2 rooted cuttings in there, as well as being uniform. So we will have a higher grade out percentage for these, and this number here will take in consideration that higher grade out percentage to have 60% here. Next, we've got this information here is going to be more growing cultural requirements, rooting hormones, and number of trays and whatnot. So we've got a column if they're going to be grown in sun or shade, their time on mist, and their watering requirements. So if they're after they've been rooted, if they're going to be high water users or low water users. All this information helps me plan out where I'm going to be sticking cuttings at with other varieties to help group them together so they have similar growing requirements. We've got a rooting hormone and what we use for each variety, tray sizes. We've got multiple tray sizes, so this number will change as well. The total number of trays, this has a formula built in that will calculate the adjusted number of cuttings divided by how many cuttings are going to be in each liner, multiplied by the tray size themselves. So this will tell me how many trays I need to stick in order to come up with this number here of 2,500. I've got the total number of beds needed, so this helps me plan out greenhouse space. There's a formula built in that calculates how many trays are in each bed and how much space this is going to take up. Next, we've got more of the inventory information. So we've got the location that we stuck the cuttings in, we've got how many trays we stuck that day, as well as number of cuttings stuck with rooting percentages. So this will allow me to keep an updated record of how many liners that I have, what the number of liners that I need to plant for that particular planting, as well as, if I'm going to be, if I still need more liners. So in this case, I exceeded the number that I needed, so I actually have extra liners, or if I still need more liners. And it'll tell me, if I'm in a negative on how many extra liners we may have. And I'll use this column here for if sales needs additional plantings, or if we need to fill some holes out in the field, I can use this number or these numbers here to help fill in that void. Next, I've got some information that my cutters will need. I have the cutting description, location where to take the cuttings at, and then the number of cuttings that we have per bundle, whether they're going to be 25 in a bundle or 15 in a bundle, and then how many bundles we need to cut. And that's how they keep track of their numbers, is by the bundles of 25. So this will tell them how many bundles that they need, as well as any comments, like if I need them to cut, a certain group, or only cut half of the tallest stage, because we will be cutting on saleable stock. We don't want to ruin sales by cutting all of it. So, we've got certain notes that we can put in right here for those. And then that way I can just select this column and print it out for their daily cut list. And then the last part here, this is more of tracking productivity. So each variety has a designator on whether they're going to be easy to cut or easy to stick, or if they're going to be difficult to cut or difficult to stick. I've got the average cutting per hour for each classification. So if they're easy, they're going to be getting 900 cuttings per hour, or if they're a bit more difficult, they may only get 300 or 400 cuttings per hour. And then this will calculate how many man hours I need in order to cut the amount that I need to take, as well as some sticking information too. So this information helps me plan out the workload throughout the week, or even throughout the year, so I can estimate how much time we need in order to complete our schedules.
I hope you found this video informative and educational. I know not all containers are produced the same way, so use what you can from the video and apply it best to your own nursery. Thanks for watching, and happy growing.